Hey guys, it's Billy Hallowell, and as you can tell, I'm in place of Kirsten Hagelin today here on Pure Talk, and I'm really excited. We're a show, as you know, we cover a lot of different topics: faith, entertainment, Hollywood, culture, and today there's actually an old friend who I've known for a little while here who's on the show. It is Phil Hotsenpiller. He is a pastor and author, and he has a book out called One Nation Without Law. How you doing today, Phil?
I'm doing great, Billy. Great to be with you. And you mentioned Hollywood, and I'm looking from my hotel room at the Hollywood Hills and the Hollywood sign. So we'll see if it will stay there through the 23rd.
Yes. Well, there's so much, you bring up the 23rd, which is interesting, and I want to talk to you about that. But there's a lot, going on in this country, in this world, and I think there's been a feeling, particularly in the last 5 to 10 years, that something is sort of off culturally, politically, socially. And obviously you write a little bit about this in your book, and you're an expert on the end times. And I think the topic, the end times, sort of, it freaks people out a little bit. There's some people who don't want to touch it, who don't want to talk about it. And there's other people who are really obsessed with it. They love to talk about it. They love to dive into it. And then there's a lot of people in the middle who don't know what to think. So I guess my first question for you, and this is a loaded question, in your view, are we in the middle of the end times? Have we hit that time period yet?
I really believe we have, and I believe the signal of that was the founding of the nation of Israel in 1948. I really believe that set in motion a prophetic clock, and things began to move much quicker than we would normally see happen. We've been waiting a long time, prophetically, biblically, historically, for that to happen. Fulfillment of Isaiah 66, nation born in a day, 2,500 years, Israel without a homeland, and all of a sudden it is literally birthed out of the ashes of the Holocaust. That set in motion a number of things that I believe we can track very easily. I think we can go to 1967, the Six-Day War, where I believe it was at least a partial fulfillment when they regained Jerusalem. And Jerusalem would be trampled down by the Gentiles until those times were fulfilled. I think we see a partial fulfillment of that now. We could look at a lot of things like 2010, when the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stood there at the 65th anniversary of the freeing of Auschwitz, read from Ezekiel chapter 37, and said, "Today this was fulfilled," which is a really interesting thing, because the next chapter, as many people know, is Ezekiel 38, the beginning of what I refer to as a World War III, and a very important prophetic fulfillment that I believe is coming down the road.
And that's the interesting part, the belief that Israel is a fulfillment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is strange that a country is gone for 1,900 years. I think if you're an atheist, you at least have to sort of say to yourself, okay, well, it's weird that this country was gone for 1,900 years and suddenly reemerged when there was a book that was written a very long time ago saying that would happen. So I want to ask you about September 23rd, because we're in the lead up now to September 23rd. And this is a day that has all sorts of people coming up with all sorts of theories. Some people are saying it's the day the rapture will happen. Other people are saying it's a day that there is a celestial happening in the skies that will sort of be a symbol of something prophetic to come. They leave it a little more general. And there are some other stranger theories out there. But what do you make of the September 23rd stuff that's going on out there?
Well, I've tried to read and watch as much as I could handle that's out there on YouTube and other places to try to put my arms around exactly what everyone's trying to say. And I don't see validity in it. I think we can look at what NASA has said. We said, hey, this is not a totally unique occurrence. This is just a phenomena that's in our world. There's a lot of hype that goes around it, and especially when someone claims to be an authority, and in the middle of undoubtedly some really, really amazingly tragic events worldwide, certainly it's easy to connect dots, create fear, and sell a lot of books, quite honestly. At least
so we're not going to be raptured. You're saying we're not going to be raptured on Saturday, probably.
Well, if we are, we're all going to be happy, aren't we?
Yeah. It's always possible, right? Well, that's the thing about this. And I think the Bible is pretty clear for those who believe in the Bible. And even if you don't, and you're listening to people talk about this, in Matthew and in Mark, and I write about this in my book, The Armageddon Code, it says very clearly that we won't know the day and hour. Nobody knows the day and the hour except for the Father, right? So why do you think people keep setting dates like this?
Well, let's call them one of the hall passes you get is no one knows the day and the hour of his return. However, what's being said here is not that, but rather talking about cataclysmic events that will lead to the rapture or create the rapture, will then signal the beginning of a 7-year tribulation that will culminate, I believe, in the return of Christ. So I think there's your hall pass. You get to pass on that one, and I get to give you a date and predict something. What's really interesting about Luke 21 that was cited in all of this is that they forget to read in verse 7 and following where it says, do not be deceived. For there's going to be a lot of clamor that's going to build up around these times. And then it's not till you get down to, I believe it's about verse 25, where you begin to see these predictions about, the water, the waves, the earthquakes, pestilence, famine, some of those kind of things. And so whenever we pull things in its full context, it helps us to really get a better grasp on it, because Jesus recognized that there was going to be deception. The disciples asked the question, what will be the sign of your return and the end of the age? And he said, be not be deceived. So we see that he knew that was going to happen. We have to be on guard and alert. And this, quite honestly, is a bit of a distraction. It also, I think it in many ways discredits those who are really good and thoughtful kind of theological people who really are trying to do a good job, present a compelling message of the return of Christ and what it means to really know and love him.
So let me ask you this, and you write about in your book a lot of the things that are happening, this quote unquote lawlessness that we are seeing throughout culture and society. With all of that in mind, as you were saying, there's a lot of fear. How should Christians approach the study of the end times, eschatology? How should they approach it where they find a middle ground of not obsessing and of not caring enough? And what's sort of your advice?
Now, that's a great question, Billy, because I think both are so tempting. One is, this is bad, I don't want to study it. The other one is, wow, everything is an indicator. I think really start reading the Bible in whole. I mean, pick up the book of Matthew, and once you hit chapter 24, that becomes kind of a critical chapter for us. If you've got a good cross-reference Bible, you can cross-reference some things that typically are laid out there, and you begin to create a bit of a timeline. And you can really do this without grabbing a book. If you just, the Bible is a great interpreter of itself. A lot of people say, well, the book of Revelation, for example, is really, really difficult to understand. It's so complex. And yet, really, it's almost set up in thirds. And the first third is talking about, church age and what that looks like. Chapter 4 begins rapture. Chapter 6 begins tribulation. And then by the time you get to chapter 19, you're at the second coming. You're the return of Christ, chapter 19, verse 11, and then the end of the age. So if you can make it through kind of the reading of it, read the first 4 chapters, skip chapters 5, or actually skip chapters 6 through 19 if the tribulation frightened you. Go to chapter 19, verse 11, start reading there and get kind of a holistic view of what's happening, and then go back in as you become more advanced student and jump into 6 through 19.
Well, listen, I love that. Now, where can people go if they want to grab copies of your book?
The easiest way is just to go to Amazon and pick up either an audio or a written version of that. And hopefully they'll enjoy it. It'll be a good read. It'll bring a lot of things together, because it doesn't just talk about, wow, things are bad and they're getting worse. It really is a book of hope. The last 2 chapters I dedicate to the miracles we've seen, the way that we've got involved in our community and the lives we've changed. And really, that's what the church is supposed to be about.
Well, listen, Phil, thank you so much for joining us. Audience, thank you for tuning in to Pure Talk. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Billy.